Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 PGA Championship DFS Tactics show. Looking forward to a very fun show, the second major of the year. We're going to try and optimize all of your lineups this evening. I've got several 6K and 5K plays for you all. A lineup shell that I've been gravitating towards the most. And of course, we're going to have all of the information you need to make your optimal decisions with the players that you are using, weather forecast, ownership projections, all of that. Looking forward to it. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out fantasynational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where earlier this week I posted some research around the past 4 winners of the PGA Championship. Why only 4? Well, I only went back to 2019, excluding 2020, when the PGA Championship moved to its now current spot in the schedule, which is now May. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I do or place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests I play. That will be no different. That comes out tonight after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see those pieces of information, then give me a follow over at X as well. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. He continues to update you throughout the week with his own research and version of recent form, course history. We've worked together for a little over a year and a half now. It's been a great partnership. I really enjoy bouncing ideas off of him, and he's made me a whole lot better of a DFS player and golf analyst in general. So go check out Gabe's article, subscribe to it. It is free to do so, by the way. The article is free to subscribe to. And if you're subscribed to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night after calls as we continue the DFS talk over there. You don't want to miss out on that. It's a lot of great discussion every week. So go show him some support and subscribe to that article. Lastly, we're live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. I do have the poll question typed up, so I'll post that right after this intro. Would love the feedback on what your answer is to the poll question. I want to hear who your winner for the PGA Championship is, who you're pivoting to, fading away from. Do you have any 6K or 5K plays? What kind of lineups are you building? All of that good stuff. Would love all of the interaction this evening. So let's figure out our strategies and our tactics for the 2024 PGA Championship. And we start, as we always do, on a Wednesday evening with the super forecast at Windfinder. Now, as you may have known throughout this week, as I've mentioned a little bit, I am very local to Louisville. Essentially is in my backyard. I am 20 minutes away from Valhalla Golf Course, and let me tell you, this forecast has changed quite a bit, especially come Friday. It's changed quite a bit even throughout today. So I'll get a little more into that here in a moment. But first, let me post the poll question. The poll question for this week: which of these players are you not? I underline or capitalize not. Who are you not afraid to use this week? Understand I only have 4 options. That's all I can do in a poll. Are you not afraid to use Scotty Scheffler with the news that his caddy Tim Scott will leave Friday night to attend his daughter's graduation? Are you not afraid to use Rory McIlroy in the news that is broken this week that he is getting a divorce? Are you not afraid to use Ludwig Aubert and his knee injury? Are you not afraid to use Will Zalatoris and his back injury? So again, would love the feedback and interaction with the poll question this week. The forecast, as I mentioned, a little bit about Louisville, Kentucky. We are situated in what is called the Ohio River Valley. And weather patterns are very chaotic. It's very fickle. Things change drastically. It is not uncommon for us to have all 4 seasons in 2 or 3 days. Weather's just crazy here, especially in the spring and or fall. And I mention all this because earlier today even, we were expected to have a lot of rain, especially come Friday evening. Now, while this isn't the local forecast, and I can tell you that the local forecast is still calling for some rain Friday night, the wind, however, has changed. We were expected quite a bit of wind on Friday afternoon, Friday night, earlier today via Wind Finder. Now that wind, especially gusty winds, has moved to the morning. So I spent most of today thinking that I was going to be talking about a Thursday PM, Friday AM favor. That's now changed. That's now flip-flopped. You see not a whole lot of wind in the forecast for tomorrow. Very calm, high of 77. Looks just immaculate for golf. We have had a little bit of rain today in the area as well. Scattered showers, but we have had rain in the area today, and we had quite a bit yesterday. So the course probably is still a little soft, would be my guess. But not a lot of wind tomorrow. So if there is going to be a day where the professionals need to get the course, per se, get their low scores, it's going to be tomorrow. Because it looks like there's going to be quite a bit of wind on Friday regardless. However, it looks like the worst of it, in my opinion, is going to be Friday morning. You see these gusts 30 miles an hour. That would be harsh as it is. But look at the difference from the sustained to the gusts. You're talking 20 mile an hour differences in from sustained to gusts. I've talked about it a few times. The most drastic example is the Players a couple of years ago. I vividly remember Brooks Koepka on 17 at Sawgrass just laughed as soon as he made contact with the golf ball because he caught a gust. The ball didn't make it but 3/4 of the way to the green. Gusty winds play havoc with professionals. If they know what to expect, as in the sustained winds, they generally know how to plan for it. But when they catch gusts, that's when what throws them off. So seeing that the worst gusting winds, as far as velocity, just pure raw velocity, the highest numbers, and the biggest difference between the sustained and the gusts being Friday morning, I think I'm going to give a decent favor to the Thursday AM, Friday PM portion of the draw. Good evening, P. Thanks for jumping in chat. I saw your comment on X. You said Bryson by 4. I actually don't hate that. A little bit of foreshadowing, maybe a little spoiler for my betting card. You might see Bryson on there on my betting card later this evening. And again, I mentioned this in the intro, but my betting card and DFS players that I'm using, or most used DFS players, will be out later after the show this evening. But I don't hate that shout out at all. I don't hate that. I think a lot of things have to go right for him, but he certainly has the length to compete here at Valhalla, and we'll talk about length and needs for Valhalla here in a little bit. But there's a look at the weather forecast for Valhalla and Louisville, Kentucky for Thursday and Friday. If we zoom out, take a bigger picture view, take a look at, say, Saturday and Sunday, we are still projected to have quite a bit of rain on Saturday. That has not changed. Sunday, I imagine the course will probably be pretty darn soft considering the amount of rain that we're supposed to get. And you see even the extended forecast is still calling for rain throughout most of the day, or at least most of the afternoon and evening tomorrow night. But when we zoom in for the super forecast, and the portion that we are most focused on, meaning trying to get 6 to 6 through the cut, I am thinking we're going to have a Thursday a.m., Friday p.m. favor. So with that, we are going to move to Fantasy National, do a little bit of review here just very quickly. I didn't even bother about unstarring players because I've got 51 of them starred. Considering this is the PGA Championship, I'll probably have a lot of one-offs in my lineup. But anyway, one thing that we know for a fact, this is the PGA Championship. It's going to be difficult. I went back and checked. Rory won at minus 16 in 2014. This has been one of the easiest PGA Championships, or at least Valhalla was one of the easiest PGA Championships in recent memory. But I still think it's going to play pretty darn difficult, and they have lengthened Valhalla a lot since 2014. So, in rounds that are difficult relative to par, in the past 2 years, our top total performers, Scotty, Rory, Wyndham Clark, Tommy Fleetwood, Xander, Cam Smith, Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Terrell Hatton, and Will Zalatoris. If you want to continue on down a little bit, looking at the top 25 or so, Henley, Homa, Rahm, Ludwig Aubert, Ricky Fowler, Morikawa, Neiman, McCarthy, Day, Batia. There's your top 20. And again, you can see to about the top 25 to maybe 28 or so. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not been good when rounds have been difficult. Eric Van Rooyen, Jimmy Walker, I hate to say it, Tiger, but I mean, it's very few rounds. Take it with a grain of salt. Thorbjorn Olesen, Zach Blair, Nick Taylor, Luke Donald, Molinari. Despite his performance at last year's PGA Championship, Michael Block has not been good otherwise when rounds have been difficult, but really struggled at the Charles Schwab, really struggled at the RBC Canadian. Any other time he has been at the PGA Championship, maybe in the U.S. Open, anything to that effect, he has really struggled. Luke List has struggled in rounds that have been difficult. Villegas, Lucas Herbert, Grayson Murray, and on down you can see players who have not been good in rounds that have been difficult relative to par. All right, I don't want to do a whole lot here. I think the only other thing we might take a look at, because we didn't pay a lot of attention to it, just because it's such a small sample size, let's take a look at Jack Nicklaus Designs just very quickly. And again, this is a very small sample size. It's just Muirfield Village and PGA National. Oh, excuse me. Let me remove the difficult relative to par filter because the stadium course, or excuse me, the Nicklaus Tournament course, which is part of the Rota at the American Express. So there's 3 courses. Of course, Muirfield, the Memorial, PGA National, which used to be what used to be called the Honda. This year was the Cognizant Classic and the Nicklaus Tournament course. In the past 2 years, on Jack Nicklaus Designs, your top performers have been Eric Cole, Scotty Scheffler, Siwoo Kim, Sam Burns, John Rahm, Patrick Cantlay, Denny McCarthy, Jordan Spieth, Joaquin Neiman, and Rory. Those are your top 10 on Jack Nicklaus Designs. Again, I'm not putting any emphasis into this other than to provide you the information, considering this is a very small sample size. Block tied the course record at Valhalla. Yes, he did. But I'm going to tell you that he wasn't playing the same course that he is now. The tees have been lengthened pretty substantially even from last year. They added 30 plus some yards on a lot of these holes. So it'll be a great story if he plays well, to do it 2 years in a row. I have my doubts considering he is not long off the tee. All right, so there's a look at your top Jack Nicklaus performers. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the mixed condition model that I have made for the PGA Championship this year and this week. So here's the mixed condition model that I have made. I start off with 5% off the tee in rounds that are difficult relative to par, and I went back and forth with myself, trying to think if I wanted to use off the tee difficult or off the tee on long courses. I ended up settling on difficult because there are a few shorter par fours that players may opt to be more conservative and lay back off the tee. Don't think it'll happen very often, and the majority of our par fours are about 480 plus yards here at Valhalla, but there are a couple. There are a couple of shorter par fours. So I went ahead and went with the difficult relative to par filter because I am very, very confident that the tournament is going to play difficult regardless of short or long par fours. But I only have 5% in it because I wasn't confident, or 100% confident in which filter. 20% in strokes gained approach, and I want you to notice that I have changed my usual sample size here. I spent a lot of time at the end of the show Monday night talking about the recent form of winners of the PGA Championship, and we looked specifically in the past 2 months. I went ahead and extended it to the last 3 months instead of the 2024 season. So I went with last 3 months, which this would take us back to the Genesis Invitational. I'm also only going back 24 rounds, not 36 like I customarily do. The reason is I want to see who is in very recent, excellent form with the irons and a few other metrics. Again, part of the research that I posted earlier this week was the recent form of the PGA champions, of the champions of the PGA Championship leading into it, specifically within the past couple of months. So 20%, we talked about how approach is just the big thing in PGA Championships regardless, especially at Valhalla, and with this very shortened time frame. 5% and around the green on long rough. I don't know how much the rough is going to really be a factor off the tee. I mean, if a player is extremely wayward, yes, it's going to be a big factor. But if you've seen any pictures from the course the past couple of days, there is some gradual buildup in the length of the rough. If you're in the first cut, it doesn't look too bad. Even the primary cut of rough isn't necessarily the worst. It is when you are extremely wayward that you are going to be in trouble. So what I am confident in is that the rough around the greens is all going to be grown up gnarly. So I wasn't confident in using, say long rough or using like good drives gained, because I don't know how much the rough is going to play off of the tee. I think it's mainly going to play a factor around the green, and that's why I'm using the long rough filter with the around the green. A little different change, at least for me. I've got 2 putting metric, and it's not just putting and 3 putt avoidance. I've actually got 2 strokes gained putting factors in my mixed condition model. The first, just like the approach, I've got 5% in just total putting in the past 24 rounds, so long as it's been in the last 3 months. Again, part of the research that I showed on Monday evening is that not only have PGA champions been in elite iron form, they've also gained strokes putting coming into the PGA Championship. And regardless of surface, the past couple of years we've been on bent. Oak Hill last year was bent. Southern Hills in Oklahoma was bent. But the players don't have a lot of exposure to bent throughout the beginning of the year. Really, it's just Augusta, and then maybe, depending on where it falls in the schedule, maybe the Wells Fargo if it moves off of Quail Hollow, maybe TBC Craig Ranch, things of that nature, or courses like that. But regardless of surface, Bermuda, POA, anything, the winners of the PGA Championship have had good putting form, good recent putting form coming in. I've only got it at 5%. I didn't want to put a whole lot into it, but I did want to make that a factor. I've also got 5% on fast and lightning bent greens. These are bent. I am wanting to see anybody who is a bent grass specialist. Think of somebody like Patrick Cantlay, who generally putts very well on bent. Denny McCarthy, yes, he's a world-class putter regardless, but his favored surface is quite clearly bent. JT Post and Keegan Bradley is another one of these players that is very, or at least statistically, much prefers bent. So I did not want to ignore the potential bent grass specialist either. So I do have 10% in putting. It's just broken out between 5% in bent specialists, specifically fast and lightning bent, and recent form for putting. So quite a bit different than what I normally do in a mixed condition model. 10% in driving distance the last 3 months. So this is the big angle that I'm playing this week. I just think distance is going to be a huge factor, especially with the amount of rain that we're supposed to get here in Louisville. Yes, you have to be accurate, absolutely, but I think distance is going to be much more important than accuracy based on what I mentioned with that gradual buildup in the rough. So 10% in distance the last 24 rounds. Look, even when Phil won in 2021 at Kiowa, he was gaining distance relative to the field in the lead up to the PGA Championship. So distance has always been a big factor for PGA Championships, especially since 2019 when it moved to May on the schedule. 10% in greens when rounds are difficult relative to par. These greens are very small, so if you're hitting the green, almost by definition, you're giving yourself an opportunity to make a putt. These greens are 5,000 square feet, very small by PGA Tour standards. So I just want to see players who are hitting greens and giving themselves, supposedly stress-free to putt for par, because that's going to be pretty good around Valhalla. 5% in birdies gained when it's difficult. We looked through a lot of this also on Wednesday night, where bogey avoidance is the more important factor, absolutely. Birdies gained was actually pretty darn strong for a PGA Championship, especially at Valhalla, since it has historically been one of the easier venues for a PGA Championship. So I didn't want to ignore the birdies gained, but certainly the bogey avoidance is the heavier weighted metric. You see I have 10% in bogey avoidance, difficult relative to par. 5% in proximity, and this is a little bit of an angle that I'm taking. You might not agree, or you can absolutely look at 200 plus proximity in this spot. And I do think 200 plus proximity is going to play a decent factor. I just kind of ran out of percent to not have it in the final mixed condition model, but it is certainly something that I am factoring in on my own when I'm making lineups. But I went instead with total procs, because regardless of the year, regardless of the course, total procs has been a very key determinant on who is rising on the leaderboard. You think about the last two PGA Championships, Oak Hill and Southern Hills. Oak Hill, those greens were even smaller than Valhalla's. Those were about 4,500 square feet, and total procs played a huge factor. A huge factor. Southern Hills total proximity was a big factor as well. So because not every single approach shot's coming from 200, again, the aforementioned, we do have a few shorter par fours. There are going to be wedges in some of these players' hands, or at least wedges, 9 irons, and whatnot. So I didn't want to put all of my proximity eggs into the 200 plus basket, if you will. So 5% in total procs. To round out the mixed condition model, I don't have anything in par threes. I don't know how much they're going to play a factor. If they do play a factor, I will just be weak to that. But I have 15% in all of par fours. Again, if you wanted to look at 450 to 500 par fours, I don't think it's incorrect to do so. But don't forget, we do have some short par fours. and I showed all of the par 4 correlation Monday night, and how, think of Brooks and Justin Thomas and these players that traditionally just play PGA Championships well. They are taking care of all of the par 4s regardless of the length. So 15%, the second most important factor in my mixed condition model. Can you play par 4s well? Lastly, I do have 5% in the specific length of par 5s. All 3 par 5s at Valhalla this year measure from 550 to 600, ranging anywhere from 570 to 590. Now, the 590 I could absolutely see stretching over 600 a day or two. Absolutely. They might shorten one of the 570 par 5s to play under 550. But for the most part, all 3 par 5s are going to play mostly in this length of yardage. So I want to see who plays the par 5s of that length the best. There's the mixed condition model that I have made for the PGA Championship this week. Feel free to disagree and put in chat or in the comments what you would have done differently. Hopefully I've explained why and my thought process behind what I've done, where I might be weak. For example, par 3s, or if accuracy off the tee matters more than what I've given it credence to. Again, feel free to put that in chat, but explain what I am focused on this week for the PGA Championship. With that, we are going to move to to Microsoft Excel. I've done that the past couple of shows now. We're going to move to Microsoft Excel, the reveal of my rankings, and not only that, Gabe was kind enough to make sure he sent over his sources, projected ownerships. So we have 2 sources of projected ownerships we can compare to each other. Quick reminder for those of you who are returning viewers, if you are a new viewer, for your information, my rankings are based on 3 criteria. The FNGC rank, which is a pure analytics or ranking number based on the mixed condition model we just went over in Fantasy National, the metrics and the percentages and all that behind it. Course value, normally this would be a value that determines or shows how well a player has played that course in the past 5 years. Because this is the PGA Championship and the course rotates every single year, I went ahead all the way back to 2012, and this is performance at every PGA Championship going back to 2012. The lower the number, the better. So you can see Rory, who's generally played very well at PGA Championship. Scotty Scheffler's been good. Siwoo's maybe not been as good. Things of that nature. So course value. And then we are playing DFS, so that is a factor in my rankings. Now these are purely from Fantasy National, just for your information. These are from Fantasy National, and since we're playing DFS, we are going to try and find unique options, and so that is a portion of my rankings as well. My rankings for the PGA Championship go as such. Big shock, I'm sure, that Scotty Scheffler is number 1 in my rankings. Rory, Xander, Hideki, and Victor Hovland round out my top 5. Shane Lowry, Siwoo Kim, not in love with that one, Cameron Young, Ludwig Aubert, and Wyndham Clark are round out my top 10. Let me get this out of the way very, very quickly. I am not going to play any Hideki Matsuyama this week. I'm going to let others take that chance, especially with his withdrawal from the Wells Fargo last week. After not hearing anything about any potential withdrawal from him, I just think it's too much of a risk, and there's quite a few players that I like in his area anyway. I'm just not going to even bother and worry about the sweat. Let me tell you about Siwoo real quick and why I'm not too crazy about him being 7th in my rankings. Yes, the irons have been fantastic. He's devoured par 4s, but he lacks a lot of distance. He really does lack a lot of distance compared to the rest of this field. And for what it's worth, his putting, both recent and on bent, have been pretty bad. Been really bad. So I'm not in love with Siwoo being 7th. I understand why the model is putting him 7th, considering he's 4th in irons and top 15 in par 4s. I'm just not as high on him. But Scheffler, no surprise. Rory, no surprise, especially after the win. Xander's always been consistent. Talked about Hideki. A little bit of a surprise maybe for Victor Hovland, but even though he doesn't have the elite finishes that these other players would have or that you might expect Victor to have, he's still been pretty darn solid statistically. Just not elite. That's what we're expected from, or what we expect from him. Still top 30 in irons. Still top 10 in greens when it's difficult. Still top 10 in bogey avoidance. Top 10 in off the tee. His struggle has always been with the around the green. I mean, you see even the putting. He is 5th on fast and lightning bent greens the past 2 years. So if Victor Hovland is indeed at 8%, which seems like that's a little bit wishful thinking, at least from the Fantasy National members, I'm going to be extremely overweight on Victor Hovland. I really like Victor Hovland this week, and the news came out that he is back to his old coach. Now, whether that makes a difference the first week, this week, we'll see. But I do like the fact that he's back to his old coach. Really, nothing else surprising to me in terms of the top 10. And of course, I mention this every major, but I only collect stats on the PGA Tour. So I don't have any live statistics. So these guys are going to be quite a bit lower in my rankings than the PGA Tour guys. Players like Hatton and Cam Smith and Neiman, Rahm, Brooks. These guys are historically and traditionally much lower in my rankings because I only gather PGA Tour stats. So they don't have anything in approach. They don't have anything in putting. Par 4s. They just don't have anything in there. Or at least what they do have is just from the Masters. So just letting you know with that. But enough of my rankings and my thoughts of my top 10 or whatnot. Let's sort on the price board, figure out where our fellow contestants seem to be gravitating in these various ranges on the price board, and see who the pivots are and whether we want to go to those pivots. So in the 5 digits, in the 10Ks, I can't say all of them are 10K, but in the 5 digits, we have 7 players. Scotty, Rory, Rahm, Xander, Brooks, Ludwig Aubert, and Colin Morikawa, and Patrick Cantlay. So my apologies, we have 8. We have 8 in the 10Ks. Just like Hideki, who I mentioned in my top 10, who I'm just going to avoid for DFS purposes because of the injury. If Ludwig Aubert plays well, I am going to lose, and that's a very big statement to make and very bold statement. I am just not going to allow myself to worry about the knee. I am just taking that completely out of being a factor, and I'm just not playing him. You see every single statistic here for Aubert is green. So if you are not worried about his knee and you want to believe his press conference, today or yesterday, whenever it was, saying that it was just precautionary and he's wearing a knee brace this week, he doesn't have any pain, that's on you. If you want to believe that, I'm not saying whether to or not to. I'm just taking it completely out of the equation. I'm just not playing him, and just removing that variable from the conversation. And I very well could lose because this seems like he would be a fantastic fit for Ludwig Aubert. If he plays well, I'll lose. I'm just not going to use him. Elsewhere in the 10Ks, the 2 most popular plays per Gabe's source is Scheffler and Rory. Again, probably no surprise there. Both of them are garnering 25% per Gabe's source. Now, Rory seems to be a little bit more popular with the members at Fantasy National, which is fine, especially coming off his win at the Wells Fargo, another very long, difficult course, and he just overpowered it. Again, Scheffler, number one. I mean, number one in almost every one of these metrics that I gathered. Approach, par fours, greens, bogey avoidance when it's difficult, he's number one. Off the tee when it's difficult, number one. Around the green, number one. I mean, he's number one in more than 70% of the metrics that I gathered. So, again, do you worry about his caddy leaving him? I don't know. He's the number one player in the world. His price is rather prohibitive, though. So if you're going to use Scheffler, you're going to have to drop in down into the 6Ks at least once, maybe twice. Maybe you have to drop into the 5Ks, which I do have some suggestions for you all down there in that area of the price board. But his price is rather prohibitive. Rahm and Brooks, they should be fine. Brooks is getting a lot of attention, rightly so, being the defending PGA champion. Rahm seems to be getting forgotten a little bit, which could be dangerous. 11% Fantasy National, 10% per Gabe Source. That could be dangerous. I don't know how I feel about Rahm, especially since he did not play the Masters very well, and he traditionally had played the Masters very well. Maybe it was just a bad week. But, anywhere from 10 to 12% on a Jon Rahm is quite crazy to think about. Xander, going to be popular, going to be a good play. I'll use some Xander. This is chalk I'll eat. I'm actually completely out on Morikawa as well. A lot of it is the fact that you can't play everybody. And I know I'm off of Obear, but I'm also off of Morikawa. His irons haven't been Colin Morikawa-like. Just very simple. And he just does not have the distance to make up for lackluster irons or even good irons. He needs to be elite with his irons to compete. And not to mention, his putting woes. So he is one of the pivots. He's sitting at 9% per both sources. I myself am out on it. That is a potential pivot. One pivot that I actually kind of like is Patrick Cantlay, and I mentioned it because of his prowess on bent greens. Now, his irons, much like Morikawa, have been very lackluster. He's a little bit more projected owned per Gabe Source than at Fantasy National, but he's still anywhere from 5 to 9%. He still has been fine. He just hasn't been elite like what we expect from Cantlay, but still top 10 in greens when it's difficult, third off the tee when it's difficult. And like I mentioned, he is top 20 in this field in putting on bent. He's top 20 in this field in recent bent or recent putting form. So even though he doesn't have the elite success outside of the RBC Heritage maybe, I still like Patrick Cantlay this week, and I think he's going to be a very solid pivot off of some of these chalky plays like Obear, like Brooks. So if you can stomach a Patrick Cantlay in your lineup, I think it's going to be pretty darn solid. So in the 10Ks, look, it's very hard for me to differentiate these two. That's 1A and 1B. If you're asking me to differentiate the two, I'm going to go with Rory simply because of the price. Because you can fit, quite a bit more in your lineups. But, in a pure vacuum, these are 1A and 1B for me, and you see 1 and 2 in my rankings. I love Xander. He's going to be popular for good reason. This is more chalk I'll eat. And I'll probably be using some Cantlay, which tells you the kind of lineups I'm making if I'm using all of these guys. That probably tells you the lineups I'm making. Rahm is quite scary. I know I haven't talked a lot about him, but it's quite scary sitting at 10 to 11% on Jon Rahm. I just don't know where he is since I don't gather live stats. Moving into the 9s. Cam Smith, Homa, Desham, Wyndham Clark, Neiman, Thomas, Hovland, Zalatoris, and Cam Young. Look, I'm just going conceptually here, but this does feel like a very good Bryson fit. A lot of the members of Fantasy National are on Bryson. In fact, the general public seems to be on Bryson. He's right at in between 15 and 16%, so he's not going to be unique by any chance. Because of that, and knowing that I have some exposure to him outside of DFS, I'm probably going to fade DeChambeau in DFS because I have some exposure to him elsewhere. But I think conceptually it's a very, very good fit. Par fours. When you say distance, I say Bryson. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what you should think and probably say. It's top 20 in distance. And the guy doesn't get enough credit for how good of a short game player he is. His around the green is very good. Of course, we don't have any statistics for Bryson and his putting this calendar year because the statistics at the Masters is proprietary. But bent's probably not his preferred surface, but he's still not bad. I like Bryson. I just don't like this ownership. So if I didn't have the outright wager on Bryson, I'd probably try to be hammering him a little more. I am okay fading him because I have an outright on him. Elsewhere in the 10Ks, looks like Cam Young and Neiman getting a lot of love. I understand the Cam Young fit, absolutely. Great off the tee. The distance. He actually hits plenty of greens when it's difficult. The big thing with him is his short game, much like Victor Hovland. His around the green game has been pretty bad. His recent putting form is really bad. Really bad. So, it's worth a time or two, but he's still, getting some attention. But you got a lot of potential pivots in here. Potentially Zalatoris, if you're not as scared of the back injury. He has played elite in his 2 PGA Championships. Victor Hovland is one of the players that is not being agreed upon between the two sources. He seems to be a pivot per Fantasy National. He's more mid-range, according to Gabe's source. So we're looking anywhere between 8 to 12%, which is fine. I'm much rather going to want to see the 8% on Victor Hovland. But even at 12%, I'm going to be overweight on him. Talked about him in the reveal of my top 10. I like Victor Hovland quite a bit this week. Yeah, so if he does not play well, I will lose. Neiman getting some attention, okay. Much like the rest of these live guys, it's hard for me to say since I don't collect their stats. It's just that Bryson does feel like a very good course fit for Valhalla. I talk about this seemingly a lot with Homa. He's just never played majors well, and then he comes to Augusta this year and plays very well. That was by far and away his best performance in a major. He's a much better player now than what he was, so getting 10.5% on a Max Homa is quite appealing. But man, maybe there was it's possible it could have been just a good week. Or maybe this is the start of a new Max Homa that actually contends in major championships. Whichever one you want to go with, you have enough data to support your evidence. Because he's been excellent the past year and a half. But he has not had sustained success in majors. So whatever narrative you want to use on Max Homa, I think it's fine. I'm definitely going to have him a time or two. But I am going to be cautious until... if he proves me wrong again, if he plays both the Masters and the PGA Championship extremely well, then 1, I'll just admit that I'm wrong and I'll eat crow. And 2, I'm going to start considering him a whole lot more in majors, considering he seems to be a different player. Wyndham Clark feels like a very good fit for Valhalla, but don't ignore the fact that he has struggled mightily in PGA Championships. Now, different courses and all that, sure. But he has struggled mightily, so don't ignore that. I know he's 4th in the Fantasy National rankings, but he drops all the way to 10th because he is somewhat popular, anywhere between 11 to 13%, and he has struggled in PGA Championships. And he wasn't the best at the Wells Fargo last week. He was actually pretty bad, but it does feel like a decent Wyndham Clark fit. And then Justin Thomas, I'm not afraid to use a little bit this week. That has nothing to do with the local boy narrative. I just think his game has been a little bit better than what his results would suggest. The irons have still been there. He's still got plenty of distance. He's just kind of struggled when it's been difficult, which is not what you want to hear for a PGA Championship. But I don't know. I think his game fits Valhalla a little bit. So I'll be using a little bit of JT. But in the 9Ks, I like Bryson. I don't like the ownership. I like Justin Thomas. Okay, I'm going to be extremely overweight on Victor Hovland. I like Cam Young. Probably going to be popular. And then I'll be a little bit cautious on Max Homa, but I am scared of Max Homa. He could ruin my week if I'm not or if he plays a lot better than what I think he might. Moving to the 8s. Hideki rated out well. I told you about him when I revealed my top 10. I'm just not using him after the withdrawal last week. I don't want to even factor him into my considerations, much like Ludwig Aubert. So if Matsuyama plays well, if Will Zalatoris plays well, and if Ludwig Aubert play well, I will lose because I am just taking out all of the injury guys from my calculations, basically. So in the 8Ks, I actually haven't been going in here a whole lot, which again will tell you the kind of lineups I'm making. But if you are in here, you do have a couple of chalky players, but doesn't seem like much of the general public, or at least that's what Gabe's source is saying. Not a lot of people are coming into the 8Ks either. Tommy Fleetwood at about 12%, so a little bit higher than Fantasy National, which is fine. I it's okay. I do worry about his lack of distance, and his irons haven't been great. But it is Tommy Fleetwood. It is a major. He's generally in the top 20 or so. Number 2 in bogey avoidance when it's difficult. The guy just plays majors very well. So ignore him at your own risk. I'm just not in love with it. Terrell Hatton getting a lot of love. Now, this is one that I do like. One of the few live players that I do feel quite strongly about. Him and probably Bryson. I do like Terrell Hatton quite a bit. 6th in bogey avoidance when it's difficult. He's actually had a little bit of distance lately, so I don't hate it. But he's at 12%, anywhere from 11.5% to 12%. And then Sahith Theegala, anywhere from 10 to 12%. And I talked about Sahith Theegala on Sunday night. He was very popular at the Wells Fargo, and one of the big reasons why I had a decent, not great, but decent Wells Fargo is that I avoided him completely. He was a full fade. And a lot of it is because he has typically struggled when it's been difficult. You see the greens. It's not great. Bogey avoidance. He has problems avoiding bogeys when it's difficult. Off the tee when it's difficult. You can see it's pink. I mean, he has not been great when it's been difficult. So you have enough reason to ignore and fade Sahith Theegala. And I think this is another fade for me this week. Probably another fade. I don't want any part of DJ. Man, Patrick Reed's kind of scary considering how well he plays difficult courses, but it just doesn't feel like a good fit conceptually. Finau's probably fine, but he has struggled lately, so does feel like a decent fit if his driver's working. Maybe. So in the 8Ks, like I didn't talk about Fitzpatrick, but at 4%, Matt Fitzpatrick seems pretty appetizing. He is 6% per Gabe source, so that is certainly a pivot that you can look to. Now he's played U.S. Opens much better than PGA Championships, but I think it's worthwhile. Again, completely out on Hideki. Fleetwood's fine. I'm just a little bit worried about his lack of distance. Burns, man, he can get really wayward. So a little bit worrisome there. Didn't talk about Lowry. He seems to be getting ignored, which is a little bit surprising considering how difficult this is supposed to get. And he generally plays difficult very well. So you might want to think about maybe a little bit of Shane Lowry, maybe a little bit of Matt Fitzpatrick. I do like Terrell Hatton. He's not going to be nearly as unique as you're hoping for. But, Sahith Theegala is a fade for me as well in the 8Ks. Moving into the upper 7s, we're running a little short on time. I still got lineups to make and stuff, so I'm going to try to get through this because I still have 6 and 5K plays I want to give you all. I like Ben On. Very popular, though. 14.5%. This is some more chalk I'll eat. Number 1 in driving distance. Top 25 in irons. 15th off the tee when it's difficult. I think he's gonna start announcing himself a little bit more in these major championships as tourney gets decided in the 6 and 5Ks. You might be right with that. The only I guess devil's advocate or pushback I would give you on that, P, is that you have to make sure you have the right guy or two up here. But generally speaking, I think you're right. You're gonna need to find your Michael Block from last year. You're gonna have to find your one guy that is relatively low owned. Say 5 or 6% or less, and who top 15s or whatever. So I do like your thought process in general terms there. Let's see. Like I said, I'm going to be using a lot of Ben On. Again, I am not nearly as high on Siwoo Kim as the ranking would suggest. I'll use him, but he's actually pretty darn popular as well. Right in the 11 to 11.5%. Minwoo Lee getting some attention as well, 12.5 and 8.5. Respectively. It's all about the distance for him. Okay. I want to like him, but at 10, just split the difference. At 10%, I'd rather not. If he was more in line with Fantasy Nationals ownership, sure, but it seems like the general public is more on Minwoo Lee. I do like Corey Connors. You just have to hope he hits all the greens and he doesn't have to rely on his short game all that much. I mean, yes, he will miss some greens. It is the PGA Championship. You have to just stomach a bad putter. But I think Corey Connors is fine. He's number 2 in irons. He's got enough distance to at least, contend. So I don't hate it. 11% is fine. Again, don't hate it, don't love it. Moving more into the mid-7s. I kind of like Nikolai Højgaard a little bit, just because of the distance. I think conceptually it's a good fit. And his irons have actually been better than what you might think. So I would not hesitate to put Nikolai Højgaard in the lineup or two. I also kind of like Sepp Straka. I know he lacks the distance, but man, a lot of other things. Like he just generally plays difficult courses well. If you think about his win at the Honda, he's a much better around the green player than what this is showing. He's a good putter. Kind of like Sepp Straka as well. Moving into the low 7s. Again, I'm not as high on Russell Henley as it might seem. He does lack a lot of distance, but you're playing him for the irons. You're playing him for the consistency of hitting greens. And he's actually been top 15 in putting form, like recent putting form. So it's probably a better play than what I'm giving it credit to. I'm just so focused on distance, and I see the lack of it there, and it kind of makes me shy away. Scott is okay. Probably fine. Like Henley's at 9%. Scott's at 8.5 to 9%. Okay. Batia. Actually, this is one in the opposite direction. Fantasy National members are on Batia at 10%, but it seems like the general public, or at least Gabe Source, is not. Batia's at like 6%. Do note that Batia won an amateur tournament here. I don't remember which one, but he did win an amateur tournament at Valhalla. So he's familiar with the course at least. Top 10 in irons. And his recent putting form is actually really good. I don't know. I think you could do worse than Batia in the low 7s. Noren's okay. Not in love with it. Again, the lack of distance concerns me. But there are two players at the bottom of the 7s that I really want to highlight. One of them is Keegan Bradley. The irons are still there. And I know the recent putting is not there, but guys, viewers, he loves bent. His best putting form but putting tournaments have always been on bent. And he's not afraid to go low every once in a while, especially when it's difficult. So I do like Keegan Bradley in the low sevens, 7% per Fantasy National, only 3% per Game Source. And the other one, which is I think, almost slam dunk for the low sevens at least, is Adam Schenk. I know he hadn't played PGA tournaments well, 2.5% and 1% per Game Source. You look at the distance, you don't think of Adam Schenk as distance, but he's top 40 in this field in distance. The irons have been fine. He plays difficult courses well. I like Adam Schenk a lot this week. Top 35 in putting form. Top 40 on bent. So if Adam Schenk does not play well, I will lose. Him and Victor Hovland. I really like Adam Schenk, and that's how I've been able to get a lot in the 10 and 9Ks. All right, let's move to the 6s and then the 5s real quick. I like Keith Mitchell. He's just popular. But Keith Mitchell, 9% per Game Source. Fantasy National has him at 13.5. I like Keith Mitchell a lot. Yeah, he'll probably have a round where he blows up, but it is what it is. I really do like Keith Mitchell this week, and he generally plays his best when it's difficult anyway. As much as Seabez, I talk about Seabez and courses not fitting him, he played pretty well at the Wells Fargo. This is probably another good fit for him if he's gotten better, especially off the tee. Irons are fine. He's always going to lack distance, but off the tee when it's difficult is not an abject failure. He's one of the best putters in this field. I like Mazadenhout. Don't ignore Kurt Kitayama. I think he's going to be pretty darn unique. He's about 6 to 8%. And I like Kitayama a lot. Distance, irons have been top 30. I like him a lot. Denny McCarthy is going to be really popular, which I hate. But I really like Denny McCarthy this week. Then in the lowest of low 6s, you can take a look at Taylor Pendrith, I suppose. Around the distance and the par 4s. He's actually 10th in putting. The problem is he's generally not played long courses well, which is surprising considering the amount of distance he has. But he hasn't played long courses well, so I'd be a little cautious with Taylor Pendrith. Then moving into the 5s, I do have a handful of players that I want to suggest to you, and only really one of them is popular. According to Game Source, Mackenzie Hughes is at 7.5%, which is a little high. 6.5 here at Fantasy National. I like Mackenzie Hughes. I normally talk about his lack of distance. He's actually been okay in this field with distance, but he is the number one putting, in-form putter in this field, and he has taken advantage of par 5s recently, which you have to do. So there's a little bit to like here with Mackenzie Hughes. He's just kind of popular for the 5K. So let me try to give you a few players who might not be as popular. Along Iron God Doug Gim getting disrespected this week. Yes and no. I want to like Doug Gim, but I think I'm actually out on Doug Gim as well. Since you mentioned him, I'll go to him very, very quickly. Because he rated out pretty well. It's about the distance and the lack thereof. He's actually been in decent putting form. But he also struggles to get a few birdies, and he hasn't been gaining par 5s. Now, yes, his proximity is good. His long iron proximity is very good. The irons seem to be coming back to Doug Gim-like status. So it's worth a shot, probably. But I am at other places in the 5K. I don't hate it, but I'm more confident in other players. One of them is Victor Perry. You see, the irons have been just as good as Doug Gim's. He's got plenty of distance. He's in good putting form as well. Gets birdies when it's difficult. Victor Peri's also okay in par fives. So I like Victor Peri at 57. If we come on down to what you lovingly refer to as dumpster diving, I actually don't hate Grayson Murray. The irons have been good. He's got plenty of distance. The only struggle with Grayson Murray is that it's generally he's been pretty bad when it's difficult. This is a play if you're trying to get extremely greedy, try to get like a Scotty and Rory into a lineup, or a Scotty and a Scheffler, or Scotty and a Xander in a lineup. Then I don't hate the idea of Grayson Murray. Two more, just very, very quickly for you. With all the emphasis on ball striking, I'm going to mention Luke List. Plenty of distance. The irons are still good. He hits plenty of greens. You got to stomach a bad putter. And he can struggle with some bogey avoidance when it's difficult. I don't hate it, but I'm certainly at others before Luke List, but I figured I would mention it considering the emphasis on ball striking I have. But the mad scientist play that I have for you all, the unique play, who is at 1.5% per Gabe Source, and he is at 2% at Fantasy National, Matt Wallace. I want you to take a look at Matt Wallace real quick. Almost top 30 in irons, top 30 in distance, takes care of the par fours. He avoids bogeys when it's difficult. Yeah, the off the tee can be maybe a little bit scary, but around the green is good. That's what he's known for. And he's a good putter. He's checking a lot of boxes as a 5,700 price player, and he's been pretty decent in past PGA Championships. The mad scientist play for you this week is Matt Wallace at 1.5 or 2%. Hubbard, EVR, Soderberg, Putnam. Putnam popped for me too. This just does not feel like a good Putnam course. Him and Hubbard actually popped, or rated out fairly well. I'm not on either of these. They both lack quite a bit of distance. They both can get kind of wayward off the tee. But they rated out okay. But I'm much more on Victor Peri, Matt Wallace, even Luke List, I think. I would like more than say Hubbard and Putnam. No thanks on Soderberg. I don't have anything really on him. EVR, no thanks. He's got a lot of things against him. All right, we are actually overtime, and I still have to make lineups. So let's get through this here. If you play tiers contests, what's up with Jordan Smith? I like him. I think he's just kind of popular. He's like 7.5 or 8% per Fantasy National. He's like 5-6% per Gabe Source. So a lot of people seem to be on him. He's actually been okay at PGA Championships before. All right, in a tiers contest, Tier 1, you have Scotty, Rory, and Jon Rahm. Again, 1A and 1B. Choose. I think I would go with Rory. It's very close. I think I'm going to go Rory with the slightest of slight leans. And it's very, very slight. It's 1A and 1B. I think Jon Rahm's a clear third. Tier 2, Xander, Brooks, Obear, Morikawa, and Cam Smith. Don't care. It's going to be Xander for me. Again, I've taken out all calculations of injuries, so I'm not considering Obear. I think Brooks is going to be actually really popular in a tiers contest, so I think you might get a little bit of uniqueness with Xander. I don't want any part of Morikawa this week, and Cam Smith's kind of meh, at least in my eyes. So give me Xander. Tier 3, Cantlay, Homa, DeChambeau, Wyndham Clark, and Justin Thomas. Ooh, I like quite a bit in here. if you're willing to be bold, I'm going to go, I would say Cantlay. Oof. Man, this is tough. I like a lot in this tier. I might go with Cantlay, thinking that I've taken a couple of chalky choices. Yeah, give me Cantlay in tier 3. I'll try to be a little bit unique there. Tier 4, Neiman, Hovland, Zalatoris, Cam Young, Fitzpatrick, Spieth, and Matsuyama. Well, again, I'm taking out all injury concerns, so I'm out on Matsuyama, and I'm out on Zalatoris. So really, I'm just kind of on Hovland in tier 4. Hey, thanks, Pete. Thanks for jumping in chat. Not an issue, or no problem. Good luck to you this week as well. Much appreciated. Let me know throughout the week and weekend how your PGA Championship's going. I always appreciate the support, P. So in tier 4, give me Victor Hovland. I'm sure he'll be a little bit chalky, but I'm just pretty confident in that play. Tier 5, Tommy, Burns, Lowry, Finau, Hatton, Tagala, and DJ. Ooh, I like all 4 of these players, but I'm probably going to take Tyrrell Hatton. The guy just plays difficult courses and difficult rounds extremely well. So give me Tyrrell Hatton. It's pretty close between these 4. So if you have a strong lean your own self, don't be afraid to go with it. But I'll go with Hatton. Lastly, tier 6, we have Mackenzie Hughes, Nick Dunlap, Victor Perry, Austin Eckroat, Matt Wallace, Brendan Todd, and Eric Van Rooyen. For me, it's between Victor Perry and Matt Wallace. I think the safer play is Victor Perry. But I'm going to try to hit a home run. I'll go with Matt Wallace, because I think he has the potential to be extremely unique and surprise some people this week. So, tiers construction goes Rory, Xander, Cantlay for a little bit of uniqueness. Tier 4 will go Hovland. Tier 5 was Tyrrell Hatton. And Tier 6, Matt Wallace. All right, let's start making some lineups, especially for our big GPPs. If we're going to make some chalky lineups, we'll try to combine some of Gabe's sources, projected ownerships, and Fantasy National here. Looks like across both of them, the top player is Rory. It's close between Rory and Scheffler, but it looks like it's Rory. And then down low, you got Pendrith at 6K, garnering some attention. McCarthy's definitely garnering some attention. I don't know if we need to go into the 5Ks since we're not going to Scheffler. So let's go with a Taylor Pendrith, who's pretty popular at both spots. It could very well be Denny McCarthy. And then in the lower 7s, even Keith Mitchell is probably going to gain some, our fellow contestants might go to Keith Mitchell as well, but let's see how much we can afford to fit in here. Batia at 72, not popular per Gabe's source. Connors is, certainly. So, yeah, let's try. If they really come down to Pendrith, they can go like Connors. Ben On absolutely is a very chalky play right now across both sources. Siwoo actually might be another chalky play. Yeah, let's try that. Let's go Ben On there. Siwoo. What's this leaving with? 89. That's Matt Fitzpatrick, who's not garnering a whole lot. Like, if you come off 100 somewhere, maybe they can squeeze a Cam Young at 9,000. Let's see. If they come to like a Denny McCarthy and then an Akshay Batia, again a Corey Connors, a bid on 9,100 now is Will Zalatoris. Well, it's Cameron Young again. So this is like a 12.5. you know, there it looks like it's pretty scattershot in the 7s and the 6s. Really, the 8s are kind of getting ignored. So it's Rory. You know, maybe you might run into a double 6 lineup where you get like a Denny McCarthy and a Keith Mitchell, which I like both of these players a lot this week. They're just going to be too popular, I think, to combine. So instead now we can do like a Rory. You come into like a Bryson. Yeah. And then, you know, whoever you want to mix and match this with, this would be a Ben on again. Maybe actually they can squeeze like a Terrell Hatton into this. And then at 73, like Batia's at 72, which would fit. Adam Scott's kind of getting some attention as well. You know, 8 to 10%. Henley, might be Russell Henley actually. He's getting a little bit of attention. You know, this is another one of those like 12.5 percenters. So you're going to get duplicated a little bit with this kind of lineup, especially with Rory and DeChambeau, Terrell Hatton, who I like. I mean, all of these players I like. I just think it's going to be too popular to combine. And then if our fellow contestants are perhaps not going to Scotty or Rory, you know, they'll come down to like a Xander, do like a Xander Bryson or maybe a Xander Wyndham Clark. I was trying to keep them out of the 6s. They might still have to go there. Really, no one in the 5 case is garnering a whole lot. Because this would be, again, this has been on. We haven't thrown Sepp Straka into one. He's getting a little bit of attention, at least per Gabe's source. This might actually have to go up to here. Batia, yeah, 71. I don't think anyone's at 71. Yeah, Jaeger. What's he on? Yeah, 9%. Okay, maybe. This might be another shell of a lineup. A little bit more unique considering they're not going into the extreme upper of Scotty and Rory, but, you know, more balanced-ish, I would say. It doesn't appear that balanced lineups are being built at all, so if you're willing to build a balanced lineup, that would be the way to go. So I'm going to try to start with that, but just understand that is not the way I've been going, so I'm not very confident in a balanced build. But if I were, I would have to do something like Justin Thomas, perhaps, starting this off. You might be able to do like a Max Homa, actually. Let's do Max Homa, then Justin Thomas. Dropping down into the 8s for maybe a Tony Finau would probably be unique enough for you. Upper 7, again, I like Ben on. He's just very, very chalky. Minwoo Lee's getting a lot of attention. This is why I don't like these balanced lineups, because the way to make those work is kind of in the lower 8s and upper 7s, and any player that I like is just getting used a bunch, as in Ben on, Tagallo, Hatton, gosh dang it, Hatton getting a lot of use. So it's hard for me to build a balanced lineup that I would be excited about. Maybe Hatton, 7,000. I'm going to say like Adam Schenker, maybe Keegan Bradley. And then 74, Ricky, Nikolai Højgaard, I don't hate. Russell Henley at 73, who I'm not incredibly fond of, but I guess we could throw in Batia. Like, you're going to be pretty unique building a balanced lineup this week, I think. I don't think there's going to be many balanced lineups. You know, the typical definition of a balanced lineup. Instead, let's try to build a lineup with Scotty. In case you are needing to scrounge into the 6s or maybe even the 5s. I've given you a few 5K plays. Victor Perry, Matt Wallace. I'm going to save Matt Wallace for the lineups that I've been typically building. I mean, even Luke List. I don't hate. But let's throw Victor Paris into one. I think Victor Paris is going to perform pretty well this week. If you're willing to go all the way down into the 5,700 range, you probably don't have to drop into the sixes. If you do, that's just going to free you up even more. And again, there are plenty of options. Denny McCarthy, even though he's popular, would fit. Taylor Pendrith, maybe. Kurt Kitayama is going to be fairly unique, I think. Seabez. We can absolutely use a Seabez. He has proven me wrong time and time again that, I would think a long, difficult course doesn't fit him, and yet he plays well. So we can go Seabez, and now, we can average 8,000 per player here. Coming up into the sevens, pick who you want in the sevens. Maybe you like a bin on that's chalky. I'm going to throw in a Sepp Straka into this. Right? I kind of like. Now we have, mid eights for both of these. You could do like a Fitzpatrick. 81 is Tagala, who's fine. I'm not in love with it, but it's fine. There's a Scotty Scheffler lineup where you're getting, two other players that are, very, very good, and generally very good in the biggest events. Victor Paris has had plenty of experience in PGA Championships and played them well. Seabass is always seemingly proving me wrong. So there's a look at a Scotty Scheffler lineup, especially if you're willing to jump into the sixes after doing the fives. But the lineups that I've been building the most are these very greedy super scrub or superstar super scrub lineups. I'm talking like we're going Rory, Xander. Sometimes I've been crazy in doing even Victor. Now, it's not, you can't do it a lot, clearly. But these are the kind of starts that I'm trying. Rory, Xander. Hell, we can try a Scotty Rory. Doesn't leave you with much. But again, there's a plenty of 5K and 6K plays that I liked. I mentioned the ultra unique Matt Wallace. I love Denny McCarthy, even though he's a little bit more popular. I like Denny McCarthy. Keith Mitchell. 6,200. These are the kind of lineups that I've been building. And this is the epitome of the greed. But maybe instead of Scotty Rory, maybe it's Rory, Xander, come on down. Like again, this is Matt Wallace, Denny McCarthy, Kurt Kitayama, Keith Mitchell, or others in the upper sixes. Seabez, Aaron Rye. I don't hate. I do worry about his lack of distance, but I don't hate. And then the 83 is like a Terrell Hatton. But I've not been afraid to double or even triple dip into the 6 and the 5s. I generally have only been putting 1 5 in my lineups. I've been doing double 6 and a 5. But even with Keith Mitchell, like this is showing a little bit of higher percentage. You're probably pretty unique with this. But if you want to get off of that, go to Seabez. There you go. There's your magic 10% that you kind of look for, and you're still leaving 100 on the table. And you're getting Rory Xander, 2 of the tournament favorites. Terrell Hatton's always played PGA Championships very well. Just plays difficult courses well. Kitayama, winner at the API, another long, difficult course. Wallace is the mad scientist play this week. So that's what I have for you all. To answer my own question, which of these players you're not afraid to use this week? Rory would be my answer. Technically, I'm not afraid to use Scotty or Rory, but if I had to choose one, it'll be Rory. One and done. I actually have not made up my mind yet on one and done. Brooks would be the logical choice, but he's probably going to be pretty popular, at least in one and done, since you can't use him but 4 events. Seeing how little Jon Rahm is makes me really want to consider Jon Rahm. I can also see a justification for Bryson. If I were to think about, a PGA Tour player instead of a live player, maybe Victor, because I think he might be pretty unique. But I don't know yet. My lean right now is Jon Rahm, thinking he's going to be, if it's anything like classic lineups, he's going to be pretty unique in a one and done. Thanks to Rory's win last week at the Wells Fargo, I skyrocketed all the way to second in my division. So I don't have to be bold. I can be a little bit conservative if I want to be. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm leaning yet. I think my considerations right now are Jon Rahm. I still have Xander available. I could do Xander. Brooks is quite obvious. I would like to see a little bit more form from Patrick Cantlay before I fire him off. Bryson makes a lot of sense as well. I think I would lean more Wyndham Clark at the U.S. Open in a one and done. I could look at Victor Hovland as well, especially if he's as unique as he seems to be in classic contests. Hatton does make some sense as well. I don't think I'm so bold or so confident to do like a Denny McCarthy or anything like that. I think I'm going to stick to the top of the the price board, if you will, for a one and done. I'm not sure where I'm going yet. And that's just the honest answer. So there's a few of the options that I have available. So that's going to do it for the show this evening. I know we ran long, but with 156 players to cover and it being one of the biggest tournaments of the year, went a little bit more into detail. Really appreciate the support. Love what I do. Taking an in-depth look at sports statistics. Trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. A reminder that my betting cards and my top player usage will be out on social media a little bit later this evening. I'm also going over to Gabe's Substack chat here momentarily. So if you're not a subscriber to his article, you're really missing out on the great discussion that goes on over there. Throughout the week and weekend, let me know how your lineups and your outrights are going. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success this week for the PGA Championship. So for all the wagers you've made this week for the PGA Championship, for all the DFS contests you play this week for the PGA Championship, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.